All right, everybody, we're starting a bit late, but welcome to another episode of the Kitty Games Podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. I am Josh Blazer, and joining me, my co-host, indie developer working on the upcoming game Samurai Pig, Joshua Reyes. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm actually excited to talk about this topic. I think I have a little bit to discuss, so I've been looking forward to this one. I actually had a little busy week myself. Spoke with the publisher about Samurai Pig, so the studio is going to be crunching, getting ready for a build. So doing great. How you doing, my friend?
I am doing all right. The reason why we're late is I had a library talk earlier today, and
Hmm.
as a bit of an announcement, I can now officially confirm books 6 and 7. The contracts are signed. I'll be making a video this week to let the greater YouTubers know about it. But game design deep dive deck builders and game design deep dive RPGs are going to
Jeez,
be next on deck for me.
awesome, man. So big congrats on that. That's a good one.
Thank
More
you.
notches in the belt, bud,
hmm
for
And
sure.
and more work to do this year
More
for
work.
sure.
Yeah. More places, friend, buddy.
hmm So, for our topic this week, I figured since last week when we were talking about studying game design, it was just basically me ranting and raving, I let Josh kind of pick the topic that he wanted to do his rant and raving on. So, what is our topic going to be for this week?
So, our topic today is we're going to be talking about should you be an indie game dev in 2022? What's the market like? So, we're basically going to talk about the tenets, the facets, the realism of it. How is it now? What is it like now? We're not really going to be discussing like how to be a game developer. We're going to talk about things to consider if you want to be an indie game developer, right? And we're talking solo, we're talking indie with the little studio, 3 to 4 or 5, etc., or even employment in the indie game development. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, what it's like working.
hmm
Or do you want to do it right now? Is it something you should consider and things that we need to consider?
hmm And yeah, talking about how to get started or doing game development, that's probably another 5 or 6 other talks we can
That,
have
yeah,
scheduled.
Yeah, definitely. Just want to make sure this isn't the how to do it. This is just what you want to consider, what you want to think about if you're seriously thinking about it.
Yeah,
So,
and the reason why I list this as the 2022 edition is that going indie or going into this game industry really changes.
big
Like I would
time.
say, like 6 months to a year easily.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, the market is constantly shifting, and any new game that comes out, as we've seen, it kind of changes the question of what a successful game could look like. I mean, we were talking about last year, we could say stuff like Inscription. We could talk about everything. What was some other? Wow, my brain's like completely fried with all the games I play. I can't think of any other big name games of 2022. Oh, I'm sorry, 2021.
Same here, man. I'm blanking on that.
And, but as another really good point, Elden Ring is right
Elden
now
Ring.
dominating the conversation. And we even say something like Vampire Survivors, which has kind of led to this whole new, like, shooter roguelike trend that we're seeing other developers chase. And this is always that challenge when it comes to being an indie dev, because a lot of people from the outside, I'm sure you've probably seen them as well, they'll look at these games and think, oh, a little game like Celeste came out in 2019 or 2018. So,
Mm.
that means I make a simple platformer, I can be rich, I can retire in a year, right?
Right. It looks so much easier from the outside. I'm going to do
hmm
this little analogy. I don't know how it fits. So I exercise, I do it daily, right?
hmm
And when you're doing exercise, you sometimes record your form, see how you're doing. So I was recording myself, right? And when I was doing the set, it felt like the hardest thing that I was ever doing. And when I recorded it and I looked at it, I was like, wow, that looked like I wasn't really struggling at
hmm
all. Right. So it's kind of like when we see a finished product and we see the thing, we have this survivorship bias, right? We believe, okay, well, they did it. They make it. So I can do the same thing. It must be so easy. And again, with the prevalence of all the tools and all the
hmm
education, right? Everything's there for you right now. And so some would think right now it's super easy to make a game, which it is, but in only certain tenets and aspects, right?
Yep, and I mean, I just literally had this discussion in my library talk about 50 minutes ago from the time of this recording that there are more tools than ever before. And one of the things that
Ever.
I said is that, we look at gaming in the game industry 20 years ago. What are
Yeah.
your options? Basically, you go work at a major studio,
Right.
you go to a college like DigiPen or Full
Right. Did you
Sales.
pin?
I think Full Sales is not even in business anymore.
No,
Or
they're gone. Yeah, they're
yeah,
gone. Full Sail's gone. Yeah, and I
and
was about. I mean, what I'm trying to think if any of them are still kind of working because they're put out by uh again the massive amount of information you can find from Udemy to
mm,
YouTube, big time YouTube, and then everybody posted Twitter, Discord. You can get information anywhere. So having to say you have to go get a formal thing for this is kind of out of the way, and that's
yeah.
always kind of been the thing with I think a majority of the degrees. I think most people would say right now like with their current degree, was it really worth it? I don't know. It
Yeah,
depends.
I mean there are indie developers doing TikToks now.
Yeah, yeah.
That is, I think, a little too young for this old Josh over on this side. And yet,
I'm gonna have to venture into it, Josh, because we're the same and but the same age bracket. I'm gonna have to venture into it. So I'm gonna pull the older game dev trying to get into it TikTok vibe. I don't know.
there
We'll
you go.
see.
And yeah, the information is certainly out there, and like it's kind of like that double-edged sword that you can find more information than ever before about game dev. You don't need to go to a school, you can go anywhere. And again, like I told the people at the presentation, that these game engines, you can literally download them right now. Like there is nothing stopping you, and you can work with a commercial grade game
Great.
engine that
Yeah.
again, like some of these engines have been responsible for, millions of dollars of revenue.
Right.
I,
Unreal Engine 4, Fortnite ships on that. Unity, I don't know, Overcooked. I'm trying to think of for Unity.
Hollow Knight
Plenty of
was on Unity. Yeah,
Hollow Knight.
yeah.
There we go. Hollow Knight. Sultan.
I don't know if Soul Sanctuary was on there or not.
Anyway, plenty of
Yeah.
great games, AAA games, indie games, all there. You can. I've even seen some really good ones with Godot.
Mm-hmm.
There's like, I mean, I literally just last night I downloaded like a Game Boy from Itch. It was like a Game Boy engine
Mm-hmm.
creator, so you can make a Game Boy engine with sprites just to look at it. I'm not going to make one, but
Yeah.
just to download it, and it's just the swath of game engines that are available. Right, you're not comfortable with C plus, you can do a Java based game system. Like you can find it's all there for you. Right, that's not the thing. When I was doing game dev, like 20 years ago or something, I mean, the information was like a desert. It was so scarce, and like to find it, you had to really like piece everything together, or maybe find some old dusty book. Like the amount of information from then to now is just astounding, right?
Yeah.
So
And again, it is far easier today. There's so much information out there. It also means that it's a lot easier to kind of learn and get started. I mean, I've spoken to like many students and people come out of college who are
mhm,
working on their games right now.
yeah,
Trayvon, who I interviewed, working on Bullet Mayan Warfare. I've gotten emails from students who are like 16, 17 years old who are still in high school
yeah.
who want me to check out their prototype for a game.
Yeah. I've
And
seen some amazing games developed by young, 17, 18, 19-year-olds. I'm just blown away by the
mhm,
quality they can achieve with these engines because again, those engines are used to produce these AAA games and you
mhm.
can just download them. No problem.
And the knowledge is also out there. So these
All
kids
right.
are studying these games. They're watching YouTube videos. They're picking up
Mm.
books and doing all this stuff. So they are like miles ahead of, somebody who was trying to get in the game industry 15, 10 years ago.
Like we just discussed last time, if I'm trying to make a platformer right now, if I was trying to make it maybe like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I'd really, really have to dig and maybe, now,
Hmm.
like we were saying, there's literally science formulas for how a platformer works, how Mario works. So you can go and get all those things, like, again, miles and miles ahead with the amount of information that's there. If you want to, and again, all these genres also kind of set, right? Like we
Hmm.
know we were talking about before, things required and I think this is something we're going to talk about in future casts, like, things required for a 4X, things required
Yeah.
for a platformer, things required for an RPG. All these things are there. We don't have to kind of guess and whatever. Of course, you got room to expand and play and
Hmm.
stuff like that, but all the basics are there for you, right? So, again, it's all there.
Yeah. And to a man that's coming out, I enjoyed Hollow Knight as well. And Hollow Knight, again, is one of those games that when it came up, it became the standard of Metroidvanias. Like it did a whole lot, and that is some good coincidence with a powerful Samuel watch in there. But yeah, and again, like the information is out there, and it is far easier to look at these games today because you can,
Yeah.
like there are developers. I spoke with the other shark who worked on Vision Software said that was his first Metroidvania. He said, "Yeah, this is my first game. Like
Yeah.
I like Metroidvanias. I wanted to make one, and I studied it." Now,
Yeah.
was it again a mass market success as we're going to talk about? No, and that's again one of the risks of getting into the indie
Yeah.
space.
We're gonna start with the fun stuff first, Josh. I
Yeah,
thought, and then we'll get to the.
that's how I do in my talk too. We have the scare straight portion and the in all my whenever I give the reality of game development. And the I think the big thing is that you're not limited by the hardware anymore. I think again,
Yeah.
like if we talk about game dev in the '90s, you needed a team. You needed to have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of computer software and hardware. You needed a publisher. You needed to deal with a retailer. This is all very expensive, and it also was a huge barrier of entry. Today, you can download a free engine. You have $100. You go on Steam. You don't need a publisher. You don't need. You can say,
Yeah.
screw you to Walmart and GameStop, and guess what? They can't do anything about you.
Thank
You
you.
don't
Yeah.
even need to, argue with Nintendo. Again, like one of like the most ironic things in the story is that when Ed McMillan first pitched buying up Isaac, Nintendo turned it down. They're like, no, we don't want this. It's too, mature, religious themes. No, we don't want this. And then they came begging to have him as a launch
Yeah.
title on the Switch.
Yeah. 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 And just that's funny you're bringing up. We're talking about the prices. A Nintendo 64 dev kit was like 100K,
Hmm.
right? So if you wanted to make a Nintendo 64 game, you need 100K just for your dev kit,
Yeah.
right? And so then we're talking about you need some really smart coders, you need some really smart animators, and they're not working for chump change, right? So I mean, 100K, you're talking about, ooh, I mean, we're already ramping up into big numbers just to make a 64 game, right? And
Yeah.
now like you just said, you could say, nah, no Nintendo, no whatever. Put it out on Steam, put it out on whatever you want,
Hmm.
and you have the freedom right now to do that, right? We're not shackled by those restrictions anymore.
Yeah. And don't forget about the logistics of retail. You not only needed to make this game, you need to get it produced. You need to get it put onto cartridges or burned on the CDs and then get
Hmm.
those shipped out all across the United States and the world. And that costs a whole lot of money, as I'm sure anyone who's done tabletop development and shipping can certainly have had
Yeah,
many sleepless nights about what happens if the shipping gets delayed or something like that. And again, don't forget about again with having public engines. Like the whole thing with Unreal right now is that they don't ask for royalties well until like the first like million or
million. You have to make a million.
yeah. So I mean, even then, it's become so much easier that
And if you're making a million, that you got other problems. It's not.
yeah, that's a problem right there. I'm sure everyone here would be complaining about getting a
Yeah.
million in sales right
Oh,
now.
why did I get a million in sales? What am I gonna do?
Yeah. And
But
it is really great to have this kind of opportunity. And I think what's also very important is that it's both large and small games. I mean, we can talk about Itch for a few minutes. Like, there was nothing like Itch 20 years ago, even
no.
30, 40, heck no. And we can see now that, again, I'm sure there are students possibly watching this who have Itch games or put up Game Jam prototypes,
Yeah.
and it's all kind of like that way of building your own game design career and your own portfolio.
Right. You are literally, and that's the thing. You're literally making your own portfolio with it. You can make your portfolio on itch.
Hmm.
Here's all the games, here's all the game jams I participated in,
Hmm.
everything. So if you do want to venture into like working on a small indie studio, there's your portfolio, right? Here's
Yeah,
everything I've done in Unity. I'm able to do this. Boom, right? Easy. And the same thing for Unreal. So
yeah,
or any engine,
yeah.
anything.
And as you said like a few minutes ago, like you don't need a team of people to make a game anymore. We have seen, 3 to 5 people team. I've spoken
Yeah.
to solo developers. I'm sure there's probably a few of them watching this right
Right.
now.
Yeah, I know there's some solo developers right now watching
Yeah.
for sure.
And this is a great way, again, that if you want to dip your toes into game dev, there's very little stopping you in terms
Yeah.
of, hardware or even location.
Right.
Remote. This is something that we've spent lots of time talking about. I've interviewed developers who never met they were never even on the same continent, and they were
Right.
still able to build a game together.
Right. I still haven't personally met any of my developers that work with me. We're all remote. One's in Belgium, one's
Hmm.
in like a state away, but we still haven't met. We're just all we remote. We do Discord, and it's just I mean that was impossible a long time ago. So again, the all of these things are available. You can have a virtual studio.
Yeah.
Uh, you know,
There's
so
very little, if you do it right, there's very little overhead
very
if
little
you want to
overhead.
get into indie dev.
Yeah, very little overhead in that respect. We will get into sustainability and profit, of course, later toward the end. We do the scared straight. We're gonna call it the scared straight portion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the overhead is so like compared to like you back in the day, of course, if we were making a Nintendo 64 game or something, we would have to rent an office to cool off this giant machine that we were creating the game on, and then we'd have to have massive offices and stuff. There was no remote. We didn't have fast enough internet back then. And so, yeah, we're just in a really good place not right now for distributed workforces and also with all the source control and things that are available, there's a lot of ways for a collaborative work. You know what I mean? You have all kind of I'm not going to get too deep because that's another one, but ton of collaborative tools that you can work with. So
Yep. And yeah, like to Dean's comment about like gameplay testers. Again, like in the past you had to have people, come to your office and
yeah,
pay for flights and travel and all that. I mean, today, look at early access. You put your game up, and in the right circumstances, people are paying you to play test your game.
I bet they gave those early playtesters like first class
Hmm.
lobster. Like,
Not anymore.
not
As,
anymore, man. Not anymore.
mm-mm. So, with the positives, I'm trying to think if there's any other major points, and the I think the last positive point I want to bring up is that the freedom to make games is
Yeah. Yes.
incredibly attractive for indie
Yeah.
devs. I mean,
Yeah,
again,
man.
look at some of the big name games, or even some just of the moderate success of the last 5 years. You have stuff like Boyfriend Dungeon. You
Mhm.
have, again, Celeste, Disco Elysium. And these are games that we would probably never see come from a AAA studio. It's far
Never.
too risky.
Yeah.
And again, in the indie space, you can literally make whatever the heck you want as a game.
Anything. It literally, yeah, again, we're very limited by technology, you
Mhm.
know what I mean? And
Mhm.
when you're a small indie studio, you can pivot and you can move so fast and you can create kind of whatever you want to. You know what I mean? So that's the amazing thing. And that's kind of why we do love indie games is because they're able to touch so many types of storylines or just try all kind of crazy mechanics and things that no AAA would be touched ever. And so yeah, we're able to see really cool creative things, and that's why the indie dev scene is so important.
And I know if you can hear, there's like a car alarm going on
What's
outside
that?
my window, so I'm hoping it will stop in the next minute.
Oh,
Unless
I
they're,
hear it now.
yeah, I'm going to try mute while I'm talking, but oh, there you go. Oh, I just played a modern retro survival horror game, Nightmare of Decay, and another one based on managing your inventory in a survival horror. I mean, that is just some, again, like two very different ideas and two of many. And
Yeah,
I
man.
think,
Like you could make like a what we had. There's games like just about inventory management,
yeah.
menu management, like a menu game. Like it's
Hmm.
really cool. You can do really cool stuff. Sorry to cut you off. I was
Yeah.
just excited about a
Hmm.
menu game.
Yeah. And again, like, the day someone could say, oh, that game couldn't sell, or this idea is too weird or out there. I mean, it's not, that's never really a problem anymore because there's always going to be a market. And again, one of the things we always say is you never know what game is going to
Yeah,
blow up. Vampire
yeah.
Survivors, like, again, not even the developers most often don't know that their game is going to be big, huge,
None,
or in the middle.
none.
Big, huge,
You
small, whatever.
you ask every single developer, and they said we had no idea that this would
Mm-hmm.
happen. Because you always hope, right? You always hope your game's going to do well, but you don't know. Like you don't know how quick it's going to take off, or like how much it can explode. So every developer's hoping for the best, but we always got to keep our realities in check, right? We're not all like, yeah, this game is gonna. You hope, but when it does,
Mm-hmm. But of course, I think with that said, that's the last positive thing for you. The
Hold
scarce
on.
rate for me,
Let
but
me
I'm going to
see.
throw it over to you.
I swear I had one more positive thing. I swear. Oh yeah. Okay. So if we were talking about, so right now, if like, we were talking about, you could solo dev, you
Mm-hmm.
can, indie dev with a small team. And of course you can also find employment because there's so many indie devs. So instead of working in like a AAA studio, which I kind of advise against, working in a AAA studio is more like you're working in a particular field or a certain sector of game dev. Like we were talking about, you're a texture artist, you're a sound designer. You're very it's really restricted in what you do in the overall arc of thing. Now, working in an indie game studio, right? You're working with maybe, I don't know, a team of three,
Mm-hmm.
five, something like that. So you're going to wear a lot of hats and you can learn a lot of stuff. So you can take that itch portfolio if you want, and then you think it's too hard to market on your own and do it on your own, well, then you can easily go over to like an indie dev employment, right? Indie dev employment is really great. There's a lot of them that do like 4 week work weeks, ton of diversity, a lot of exclusiveness. So, indie dev scene, like bigger studio, I guess indie studios are really good places to work for. Really small. You're going to learn a lot more than if you were working in a AAA studio, for example. And then you could work
Mm-hmm.
in a small studio for a bit, finish a game, and then once you learn all that stuff, you could go back and then be indie on your own, start your own team, and you'd be a lot more successful than if you were coming from just like uh, sound designer or texture artist and then coming to try and make your game. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So, employment's great right now for it.
Yeah, and I'll also add that if we talk about what, the goal of indie dev was maybe like 10, 15 years ago, a lot of people would say, oh, you just go indie to then go AAA. Kind of like going
Right,
from, being like an indie filmmaker to then, working on like Marvel
right.
movie. But
Yeah,
what we've seen today is that being indie is very viable. It is viable
right.
for a long term career. We've seen studios like Kid Fox Games, Daniel
Yeah.
Mullins again, who blew up with Inscription, that Jake Burkett of
Big
Gray
Burkett.
Alien, Cliff Harris, Jeff Vogue, that there are developers who have made a living. Like they are
Hmm.
living off of their own games. Like
Hmm.
it's not their goal to make a game and then go work at Nintendo or
No.
work at EA. They're living off of their own games and they're living their best lives possible.
Right. I kind of think like it's diverged now. I think that people either like they want to work in the field and they're going to go triple A or
Hmm.
they're going to start somewhere in indie because there's definitely a difference in it. But just like you said about that, before people wanted to go to triple A, like okay, I'm going to do indie and then go to triple A, but not so much. There's more. I think I see more people leaving
Hmm.
triple A and going to indie just from I think from the crushing capitalism of it.
Yeah, and of course all the lawsuits at Activision Blizzard right now.
Activision for sure, right?
Hmm.
And the work environment and all those other things, those
Yep.
factors that go along, right? So,
Yep, you don't need to kill yourself to make a video game. It sounds very
right,
shocking, but
right. So, shots fired. You don't need to kill yourself to make a video game.
hmm.
No one's dying because the video game isn't being made, and that's what I was talking about with these indie days. Some of them are doing 4 day work weeks, all remote.
Hmm.
I mean, just really because we're making a video game, and if you're stressed out, like we've heard these horror stories of crunches and how much some of these workers work just to produce like a Call of Duty or a GTA or something like that. Massive hours put in, right? And
Hmm.
is it worth it? Like there's like, texture artists, modelers with like carpal tunnel syndrome now, and we
Hmm.
won't know who they are. And they did that for like a little texture on the side of a house and stuff. That stuff isn't worth it. We definitely, another talk, don't want to get into it, but like the sustainability of the industry, those type of things really need to be addressed.
Yeah.
Because, so
Yep, and again, another major point about again why this is the 2022 edition is that things can always change. Who knows
yeah,
what it will be like to be working in this space in the next 3 years, 5 years, and it's both good and bad in that regard. But again, I think ultimately, like the main point for this positive section is that it is viable to go indie. That this is not, a as huge of a gamble as it was 15 years ago, or that there wasn't a
yeah,
lot of information, or this was this untested water of game dev. It is
right,
successful. It is, pretty much standard now, and it is accepted, and
yeah.
that is great.
Yeah, like proven,
Mm-hmm.
accepted. People know now that this is a viable way to sustain, this is a living now. Before it was kind of like, wait, you work in video games? Now it's like, oh wow, you work in video games. So it's totally changed, right?
Mm-hmm. The
So
next question they all ask is, so did you work on Fortnite? Are you working on
right.
Fortnite or Among Us?
Yeah. Yes, right.
A gamble. All right. But I think we can probably talk about the scary part about this,
All
or the
right.
scared straight. So,
Right.
game dev, no matter how you shake it, no matter how much you know, no matter if you have a year, 10 years, 30 years making games,
Years.
it is still risky. And the risk of making a successful game, that I think continues to go up with each passing year.
Yeah, it is going up. And as we were talking about the numbers, so I was looking at the numbers like Steam sales and like how much the average indie dev made from like 2019 to 2020 to 2021. It was massive how much it was changing, right? Like the games that were making the most started making more. The games that weren't making as much started making less, right? So
Mm-hmm.
just each year it was changing. Let me see here. I have actually Jake Burkett's right here. Tweet up. Um so, like, we're going back to even 2013, right? In 2013, indie games made about 110K, right? Like, that's pretty good. The top 25% made 590K. Pretty good. I'm just going to jump ahead to
Mm-hmm.
2019. Okay, so let's remember in 2013,
Mm-hmm.
Medium was making 110K, right? Now
Mm-hmm.
we're going to 2019, and the Medium makes 1,400, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and everything below that's basically zero, right? And that's 2019. I had my 2020 facts up here, which I lost, but I think we can. I'm not going to be able to find them in time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now, and this is just like a medium average, right? Here's the scary part: the average indie game makes $3,947. Of
Oof.
course, this is skewed by ones who make more and ones who make less, so it's just a medium. It's not the best, but
Mm-hmm.
hearing that is definitely something to consider and take into account. Now
Yeah.
I got some better numbers to look at because again, like we were talking about the viability, it is there, right? Um, but the gamble is worse. So for example, oh, if we're talking about, yeah, we're talking about average of so only like, the average made $3,947, right? But 9% of them made 200K. So out of,
Mm-hmm.
9% making 200K, and then the very, very top percent, indie games, we're talking indie games, 1% made 7 million. Okay, so that's a kind of a big gap, right? Like depending on your percentage on how much you're selling. I lost our feed here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me get this back. But yeah, so like that's a bit scary when you're hearing that the average is about 4K, right?
Hmm. And again, this is one of the double-edged swords about the indie dev space. 10 years ago, if you release an indie game, what is the
Oh man.
market going to be like? It's maybe another 20, 30 games,
Yeah,
maybe. I mean,
maybe like
the
13, 10. I swear when I like when it was coming out, I swear I could only think of like two a year, like two
yeah,
or three big, like it was because it was still very difficult to get onto the Xbox and
it's
or to get
Steam.
anywhere. Steam.
Again,
Oh
like
my, yeah,
people who are getting the game industry today, they do not know what it was like 2008 to like 2012, 2013 era of
yeah,
Steam. That
yeah,
was where you had to or either know somebody or you had to be famous to get your
yeah,
game on Steam. Like being on Steam back then was pretty much akin to making a Marvel movie today. Like
yeah,
you
yeah,
are set. But and
yeah.
again, like a lot of early developers who were able to do that, like Cliff Harris, Jeff Vogue, Rami Ishmael, like they
Yep.
got a really lucky break back then. And again,
Yeah,
I'm not putting words into Rami's mouth because I spoke with him and he said that if he tried to make the same game today as
couldn't
he
do
did
it.
back then, it would have been a complete failure.
Yeah, not even a chance. Like it, no way. And like it was just the perfect time, like
Mm-hmm.
the perfect season. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's true. It's changed so much. When did it release? What the shark fishing game? When was that released? Oh boy,
Nuclear Blaze, or are you thinking of the other one?
the other one, this shark fishing one,
Ooh,
radical. Anyway, regardless,
mm-hmm.
I mean, the big change since then.
Yeah, and as we've said, like another big thing was kind of what people expect and the pricing for games.
Yeah,
We had
yeah,
like 4 years, maybe 3 years of that whole race to the bottom. That people
yeah.
just said, you know what? I'm not spending $14.99 on a game. I can get 27 mobile games for free, or play this game for 99 cents. Why should I give you money? And
Yeah,
it definitely was like a hit to the knees for a lot of indie developers. Again,
big
major
time.
developers, you're working on a $50, $60 game, you have that clout. Like if
Yeah,
BioWare says we're charging $60 for Mass Effect, people
easy.
aren't complaining that. They're just going, here's my wallet, take whatever you want.
Exactly, exactly, and then again, how an indie game is priced is very important to the profit. Um, for example, this is like in 2019 stats. So, like, if you sold this in mediums and averages, it's just so a $10 game would average about 16K, right? And these are the good ones, the good ones. $15 game would average about 30K. And if you go up to a $25, you're making 200K, right?
Hmm.
That's a big difference with the same. And again, it's like, is it the consumers? Is it there's a lot of facets, the quality of the game, the consumers, too many facets to do with, right? But that race to the bottom, right? If I'm going from $25, I can't sell my game for $25 anymore. So I'm gonna have to cut it down. I could have made 200K. So I'm gonna have to sell it for 15 because the market's just not
Hmm.
there anymore. So I went from 200K possible to 35K, right?
Yeah.
That's a big difference. And the race to the bottom, most indie games are free, right? How many indie games do you pay for an itch?
Yeah. How many Humble bundles? How many Fanatical bundles? Games Pass right now.
Games
Like,
Pass, and it's
it,
only going to get worse. Like Netflix is probably going to get into it. Elon Musk is probably going to get into it.
uh,
I mean, I
yeah.
should have said his name. I'm sorry. Um,
Yeah, and again, like it is great for consumers. Like consumers
yeah,
love this period. But again, as an indie developer, and this is something that I said in my presentation, money has to come in. Like
yeah,
if you want to stay in business, you need to pay to keep your lights on. You need to pay to
yeah.
keep your mortgage. If you work on a game for 5 years and nobody buys it, you know, where's the money for your livelihood coming from then?
What are you going to eat? How are you going to? I mean, and that gets into, like for example, I'll just diverge for a second. Um, uh, well, well, let's finish this because I don't want to get into like the social needs and the all the other things that you need to consider, right? There's
Oh
it
yes.
you got financial and all that, but then you also holistically. the life of being an indie game dev too is what I'm going to touch
Mhm.
on. Let me not get into that yet.
Yeah,
Um,
and to Mojo's comment, Steam Greenlight, that was that the voting one or is that the $100?
that's the voting one. That was the
That
voting one.
one I think is gone. I think they got rid of Steam
Yeah,
Greenlight. Now it's just the Steam Direct or
correct.
yeah. So
Yeah,
$100, you get a store page. It doesn't matter
yeah,
if you spend 10 years on your game or you just took a prototype that you made while you were like with your eyes closed. You can get
yeah.
a store page on Steam.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, like all you have to do is just have the relevant information. If you're a business, if you're not a business, you literally can just do it solo with your social and $100. Boom, you're set. So
Yeah.
that's it.
And the risks of these games, another point again, is that there are tons and tons of games being released. Again, we see 40 to 50 games probably weekly now
Yeah,
between AAA, indie, and AA.
yeah.
And not every one of those games is going to be a mass market success, obviously, or wasn't even intended to
Close.
be. But
Not even close.
they're taking attention away. I mean, look at how many games YouTubers will cover, and that was
Yeah,
another big thing. 5 years ago was kind of the rise of the influencer. When you get
yeah.
somebody like Markiplier or Northern Lion or PewDiePie to play your game,
Wild time. Yeah.
yeah, and Twitch streams as well. That these are all new ways of marketing, but again, it's that problem of, you know, are you just going to call up PewDiePie and say, "Here, go play my game," and he's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it for you. I'll do it for
Mhm.
free, right?"
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I've even seen like because if you're an indie dev, you get bombarded with various we'll market your game for so much, and there's like a lot of them like you pay the streamer to play your game, right? It's like pay $2,000 to have this famous streamer play your game, and that's wild because again, that's a gamble. This person could
Hmm.
totally destroy your game, say bad things about your game. You don't know what. I mean, you're not paying them to be like, yeah, this is the best game ever. They're just gonna play your game, right?
Yeah,
So,
and I mean, like for me, like I can tell you, I do not charge $2,000 for me to play your game
right,
for sure.
right.
And yeah, you don't know how someone's going to play your game. And again, I think to Chris's comment there, that's something I definitely want to touch on. That people expect quality. That again, like this is something I say a lot. That 30 years ago, even 20 years ago, indie was basically code for shovelware. This was,
Yeah,
the trash game you find a 99-cent bin,
the
you know,
bins.
something that it's not even worth like 10 minutes of your time.
We used to get video games out of bins back in the day.
Yeah, in the olden era. And then when we, compare that to today, when we say indie, we can talk about games like Celeste. We can
Yep.
talk about Slay the Spire, Stardew Valley, Minecraft originally started as an indie game. For some people may not
Mm,
choose to believe that. Kerbal Space Program,
Kerbal.
Factorio. Again, like the games from Kitfox Games that do a lot in terms of representation and being inclusive. That,
Yeah.
you know, the term indie is now kind of like for some people like a high badge of
That's
honor.
counter. Yeah, definitely. Like I've definitely seen that shift. Like maybe I'm into too much of a bubble on Twitter, but I've definitely seen the switch that people love indie and they love, because it's humans, like it's people.
Hmm.
It's not a giant corporation. It's not Ubisoft. It's it's humans that are making the game and we can talk to you and relate and stuff like that. Um
Yeah, but again, that also raises that issue of standing out.
yeah.
That if let's say you want to make a game, but you're not the best artist. Let's say you just
Yeah.
want to use placeholder art, or just have like little sticker characters, and somebody takes one look at your game, they're gonna go, ugh. Like they're not even gonna look at your price. They're just gonna say,
Right.
it's kind of like when you pass like those very like rip-off books, like those 99-cent books like a supermarket that
Yeah.
everyone ripping off Twilight or 27 different young adult books that people
All
like.
in one.
Yeah, that again, like 20 years ago, if your game was just a game, you could maybe get some people buying it just because there weren't any other options on the store. Today, if somebody doesn't like your game, not only are they not going to buy it, they can refund it. Again, like refunds. That was another thing that came about in like the last 6-7 years. That the days in which you could get stuck with a bad game or you could lie and people couldn't do anything about it,
Yeah.
that's not happening anymore.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I think around then there was a ton of abuse from just people flipping,
Mm-hmm.
just ridiculous assets. I mean, just nothing, and so that was probably it was just being too abused too much. So they had to implement that refund for sure. But it's definitely changed. That definitely changed the game for you. We know now that if I release a game, someone can buy it. It doesn't mean the sale's final. You know what I mean? So that's
Yeah.
kind of scary too.
Oh, yes. And again, you also have to be worried about other people making games. Like, this is something I think a lot of indie developers may not have thought about 10 years ago, but there's a market now that
Yeah.
if you try to release your game, let's say the same week that Megacrit decides to put out a sequel to Slay the Spire or another game, you may not be competing directly with them, but you are competing for attention.
Yeah, for the noise. There's
Mm-hmm.
just so much noise out there. And if everybody is talking about anything but your realm or your game, I mean, well,
Elden
that's
Ring
it.
right now, like, it's
Talking about,
dominating conversation.
yeah, is there any other game out? I mean,
I never heard of any
it,
other games. I'm not playing anything else. But I did finish it, so I'm done.
okay, it's done.
I'm
Done.
free. I
All
killed the
right.
god at the end. I'm the lore now. I'm free from the game. But again, like next, I heard that the next Summerfest is going to be happening next month, and that's another thing to keep in mind. What happens if you try to release your game during a major festival? Are people going to watch it? And suddenly, you need to think about release dates and about being able to say that, if I say my game is coming out August 5th of 2022, I need to have my game done by August 5th, 2022. And if you say, well, I don't know, I guess I can't do it, let's, set sometime in October, what's the guarantee that those people are still going to be interested in that game?
Exactly.
Or
Yeah,
if somebody else releases a game that could even be
better.
similar. Yeah,
Similar
better.
to yours. And then
Better,
yeah,
similar.
they release it before you, and then you were making it before them, but you release it after, and they think you're copying off of that game.
Oh, yes. There was a developer I spoke to, this was like 10 years ago, who was working on a game. He wanted to make like a space sim, spaceship kind of game, because nobody was making games at that time. But guess what? It took him like 3-4 years, and by that time, all these space games came out.
Mm-hmm.
And again, your unique game is now just another game in that list.
Yeah.
Deck building roguelikes. Again, I know a few of you right now watching this probably like threw up a little bit in your mouth thinking about playing another deck building roguelike.
Another
I
one.
I love them. I'll keep playing them. Again, if you're an indie dev with a deck building roguelike, send it my way.
Yeah.
But again, that problem is it doesn't matter if your game is unique, original, the most beautiful aesthetics, if everyone is sick to death of playing that specific game. Look at Battle Royale. Again, there was a period where every single developer wanted to make a Battle Royale game. I got flooded with emails of this is the next
So
Fortnite
many.
killer.
So many battle royale games is unbelievable, and then so many indie devs. Like there's so many indie. Yeah, I'm making a battle royale. Man, I'm making a battle, and I'm like, there's not enough people to play all the indie battle royale games y'all are making. Like,
Mm-hmm. Look at Among Us. Again, like,
yeah,
Among Us is a very principal example of the scared straight portion that when the game came out, it was a failure. It was 100% without any stretch of the imagination. It failed. It did not do anywhere near. And they got a lucky break in, I think that was 2020, when it got picked up by major streamers. And all of a sudden,
yeah,
people really enjoyed that game.
wild. It's like 2 years, right?
Yeah. And again, like this is something that I said when I was talking about with Cuphead. That with the Cuphead developers, they took a second mortgage out on their home. It could have failed. They could have been out of a home. It succeeded though. It blew up. They have a Netflix show. They are secured. Much like how Red Hook Games is secured after the success of Darkest Dungeon. But for every success story, we can probably point to several dozen more failures. And
Yeah.
people, that game that I played, Dice Tinny, that the developer went bankrupt and the bank foreclosed not only on the game, on the studio, but on the game. Like the bank in China owns that game. And the developer is basically like blacklisted because they couldn't pay. It got foreclosed on.
Yeah, and the thing is there's so many, right? So many
Hmm.
failures, and like they're not going to speak. No, they're not. No, they're not going to speak up. They're not going to give numbers out. They're not going to talk because it's embarrassing. It's hard to deal with. Um. So yeah, and so I think it'd be really good. Actually, I don't know. I actually heard it's not good to talk about. I think we need
Hmm.
postmortems on failures definitely
Yeah,
more instead of success stories.
yeah. The GDC, they usually have a failure workshop that I think
Right.
more people need to watch.
For sure. And
Because
I
it,
think they usually have like 10 people talking, right? They have a whole bunch. And so you can get like a whole bunch of stories of failure workshops. Real important to
yeah,
watch for sure.
because you need to know again why a game fails. Like it's something that we've said a lot here that you learn more through failure sometimes than
Yeah.
you do success. And I
Yeah.
think this is the other point about being scared, or the scare straight of this section, is that people love the underdog stories. They love to hear about a developer who spent 10 years of their life and, they nearly went bankrupt and, their whole family almost collapsed, but they
Eating
got that.
ramen all day.
Yeah. They got the game out and, Microsoft picked it up and now they're rich and famous. And kind of like, I think a lot of people really evangelized Indie Game the movie. When they saw people like Emmett
Yeah.
McMillan, Phil Fish, and I forget the third one, Jonathan Blow. They see
That's a
these
blow.
developers who they struggle, they push through, they did it, they got the success. It's that same kind of like the underdog story we always see from like anything that deals with like capitalism. That
I was intoxicated by it too. I saw it
Mhm.
and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Mhm.
You know?
I know Yantra. I beat Yantra to his comment there. Yeah, and again, people love to see that. But the problem is, like we said, it is a huge gamble. You never know what your game is going to do. I mean, developers will say, wishlist the game because they want to have some idea, but even wishlists don't magically translate into game sales.
Not at all. Not at all. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's like 10% of your wish list actually like are solidified sales that you can count on. Like it's
Hmm.
really low. I'm probably undercutting it or maybe overcutting. I don't know, but
Hmm.
it's not good.
Yeah,
Wish list is just one indicator and you need way more than you think.
yeah. And to Chris's comment, yeah, again, like whenever a genre blows up, it becomes the dominant one for at least a year or two. I mean, we can again like in that video I made where I got frozen for a few seconds. Like, pick any big name game, and you will see for the next year or two that that genre dominates
Yeah,
everybody.
2 to 3 years.
Hmm.
Yeah. About four maybe, and then by the fourth year, that's given enough time for all the studios to make their own version, and the fourth year is like that's
Yeah, and again, it's all again somehow we'll always get back to Elden Ring. I think for every
Elden Ring.
conversation this year
Mhm.
that people are obviously pouring over Elden Ring. I'm talking about from the development standpoint. We're not even talking about
Mhm.
consumers right now, but they are going to look at every inch of that game to figure out how do we make an Elden Ring like.
Mhm. They're
And
gonna fail.
yep, and again, because the market has already been shifted. You can't
That's it.
reinvent the wheel if the wheel has already
Already
been
being written.
reinvented.
Yep, you got it right on point, Josh. I mean, I could have said it better myself, man.
Yep,
That
and yep, go ahead.
nope.
Oh, I was going to say, and yeah, to Chris, it's kind of like Metroidvanias that we are all waiting for the Silk Song. The new song Sanctuary is
Hmm.
out in 2 days. I have a key. I'm itching to play that one.
Oh, nice.
And again, and I think to get back to the point about quality, people don't want to play your worst version of a Among Us or a Metroidvania or a
You're
Slay the Spire.
you're barely functioning, buggy
Hmm.
stick figure. Yeah, they don't want to play it. They don't have time. No,
They
we don't have that. They don't.
they want to play the next big thing, and again, like aesthetics are a huge point in that. I mean, look at a game like Grease. That was like one of the most beautiful 2D platformers I think I ever played, and so about Ori as well. And again, like this is something that I say that it's a bitter pill to swallow for a lot of indie devs, but graphics and or I'm sorry, aesthetics really do sell a game. If someone looks on your store page and they just see, again, placeholder art, stick figures, and everything, are they really going to spend $15.99 or $4.99 or $1 on that game? But if they see a game that looks like Ori, or if they see, you know, Mario times, like it looks like an actual cartoon, like something beyond even
Yeah.
Cuphead, they're not even bother looking at the rest of the store page. They're just gonna go, "Oh my god, what is this amazing
Mhm.
looking game?
Yeah.
I need to go play it."
Yeah, art quality and consistency go so far.
Oh,
And again, like you say, you can literally like parse it, and if it looks pleasing to your eye and you could tell what it is from those
mm-hmm.
images, boom, done. No more needed. So but again, if you look at it in every images are missized and every
Mm-hmm.
in placeholders and this and that, same thing. Boom, on to my next
Yeah,
one. So
and yeah, like Chris, I hope you watched my latest video because I talk about Vampire Survivors. I played a game inspired by it, and at the same time, another developer came on chat saying, "Hey, I'm working on a Vampire Survivor like game too." And again, as I said, there's nothing wrong with being inspired, but you have to understand what this means in the market. That people don't want to play inferior games. They don't have the time to play a game that is maybe only. And I think this is like the scary thing about like reviewing games. That for the longest time, there's that thing that if a game doesn't get at least 8 out of 10, it's automatically dead. Like nobody
was dead.
cares.
I was blown away. I was like, people were, dumping on 7.5s and like, what are you talking about? Um, and another thing to consider before I forget, and you were talking about the market, don't forget that there's a whole other world other than video games, right? So, for example,
Mm-hmm.
you were talking about the zombies. The Walking Dead was there around the same time, so people were sick of zombies by that
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, by Days Gone or something around that time. You know what I mean? So like there's other things going on. Maybe don't make a superhero game because there's a million Marvel movies out. Like consider everything going on also. Don't just bubble yourself in game dev. Like we said, play games, look
Mm-hmm.
around you, watch movies, read, etc., and just be aware of the overall climate. I do have a side note on that.
Mm-hmm.
um as far as like following trends and things on that, sometimes I think that's a pitfall, right? I think that
Mm-hmm.
if you're studying what's going, because it's always going to change and evolve, and I think sometimes it might be safer. Keep an eye out, but I think it might be safer to just go with maybe what your vision is and what you want to build instead of chasing the market. Because
Mm-hmm.
chasing the market, you're chasing the Elden Ring that's already done. It's already been
Yeah.
done, so you can't make it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And another big point again is understanding the actual size of these markets. That
Yes.
this is something I talk about in my upcoming book. There's a huge difference between a fan of a game and a fan of a genre. Look at
Right.
the MMOG genre that people were clamoring after World of Warcraft was at its peak. It was about I think 12 to 14 million subscribers a month.
No, I think it
Just
was like 17 or 18.
oh jeez, that was probably
Yeah.
even like super peak World of Warcraft.
Yeah. Hmm.
And everyone said to themselves, well, what if we just get a quarter of that? What if we get a tenth
It's
of that
a little
percent?
bit.
And that led to that huge, just every major property had to be an MMO back then.
Wild Star.
Oh, yeah, Earth and Beyond, Star Wars, Star Trek, you name it. But,
Lotro.
oh, yeah, Dungeons and Dragons, Matrix. How many here play the
Matrix.
Matrix online?
Anybody, yeah, say it in chat if you play Matrix
Yeah.
Online.
But the point is that all those, 10 to 18 million people play World of Warcraft, none of them, or even just a fraction of that, tried those other MMOGs. Because
Not even.
again, if I'm playing World of Warcraft, which is kind of like, the Rolls Royce of
Yeah.
MMOs,
Yeah.
why should I go play yours?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna go to this other one. All my quality of life things are
Mm-hmm.
missing. This upgrades, and then I come back, everything's super polished and amazing because that was like the best. The like Blizzard was at its peak at that time, just
Mm-hmm.
for polishing and like we said, I think in the last podcast, just taking genres and things and
Mm-hmm.
polishing it, taking what's broken here, what's broken there, and polishing it all, and then you have this amazing product. Blizzard was like at the top of the game then.
Definitely. And again, with that market, just because you see all these people playing this game, that doesn't mean that that's immediately going to translate to your game, even if it is a better version of that game. That's the even scarier part. Like, again, Slay the Spire, Monster Train. Monster Train, I think, is superior to Slay the Spire. It did not even earn half the reviews and sales of Slay the Spire. None of the other deck building roguelikes, I think the only one that's come close is Inscription. And Inscription is completely different from Slay the Spire. And that's what we were saying about understanding what these games did, but still going in your own unique direction.
Exactly. And then again, analyzing what you can prove on, what
Mm-hmm.
they did wrong, and how you can change it. Also, think about what you don't like about the genre and how you would like to make it better. Be like, I don't like this about 4X.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I have to do this? And then
Mm-hmm.
change it in your own way.
Yeah. And to Dean's comment, thoughts on narrative
Yes.
indie games. Like, that's a very unusual genre. Yeah, it is very difficult to analyze because it is so story driven. And this is what we said last week, if you remember about visual novel games, that a lot of people treat visual novels as, this bargain bin. It's so easy to make. Just, put a bunch of pictures, type up a little story, sell for $24.99, you're done. It's so easy to make a Gone Home or a Doki Doki Literature Club. But it is a hard genre to really stand out in because, again, the easier it is to make, the harder it becomes to then do
Exactly.
something bigger or worth it.
Exactly. That's why we get to the platform issue. So easy to make, uh, so hard to get correct. You know what I mean?
Yep, and
So
even if you do get it correct, you still need to convince people to play it.
to play it, yeah, because they're gonna be like, that looks like every other thousand platformer I've seen. So
Yep, and it is incredibly difficult to stand out because of that. As we've said, very little has to go wrong to doom a game, but almost everything needs to go right.
yeah,
And again, people I'm sure will point out, well, what about a game like Ghost Simulator? What about a game like Gone Home or Outlast? These games that just kind of like came out. Five Nights at Freddy's is another one that I'm sure people will point to. And again, this is something that I've said, I'm sure you will probably agree with this, that many people don't understand why a game succeeded or failed.
not at
And
all.
it is impossible from the outside, unless you actually talk to the developers. It's why I love to do all these interviews. Because I want to hear what their thoughts on as to why their game worked or it didn't work.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Let's see, anything else? We talked about the risks.
Oh, I got more.
I'm sure we can both come up with a lot more. While I'm thinking of another one, I'll throw it over to you.
Okay. So let's go ahead. We talked about the finances, right? Like sales and stuff like that. Let's talk a little bit about yourself, right? And you need to look inside yourself and see if this is something that you really want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is hard, right? Indie game dev is not easy. Like we were saying, it looks really easy to look at the narrative game and say blah blah blah. It's really easy, but is not. This is a multidisciplinary. Uh, there's so many things that you need to learn from art, programming, code, design, study, story, narrative. Um, I'm not even close to halfway done. Did I say sound design? Did I say modeling? Did I say animation? So there's a ton of just scratching the surface, right? Just and then putting
Mm-hmm.
it all together, working with other people, working solo, time management. Um, so there's just a lot of things, right? Do you have thick enough skin to post it on
Mm-hmm.
Twitter, and to deal with the what people are going to say to you? Do you have the consistency
Mm-hmm.
to continue to push forward? I'm going to keep tweeting. I'm going to keep talking to people, because again, like there's going to be setbacks and setbacks and setbacks. But you have to push through them, right? Because none of this is easy, right? If this was easy, of course, everybody's trying to do it, but I think once they've tried it a little bit, they might stop.
Yeah, and
Um,
don't forget being able to stand it if someone says "I hate your game" or
right.
they play your game and go "This sucks."
This
What
is
the
the
hell did
worst.
you do here? And if your first,
Lazy, stupid.
mm-hmm,
And then how do you take that? You
Yeah.
know,
If your first thought is to punch this person in the face at a major trade show, that's probably not the wisest suggestion or wisest tactic there.
or to give up, or to give up and just be like, wow, I'm just not good, and to doubt yourself, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, oh my gosh, I got so much on this topic, right? So
Hmm.
you have to be able to deal with failure, thick skin, and then of course this is a passion field, right? You have to have the passion. You're
Hmm.
not doing this because you want the money, right?
Hmm.
You want to have the money, you want to attain sustainability. That's the goal, if that's what you're wanting to go for, right?
Hmm.
um but all the other facets, you need to be able to take care of yourself, you need to be able to
Yep.
deal with everybody. So like, not only that, you have to know how to organize your time, you know how am I going to study, when am I going to build. And then like, let's get into like the your support system, right? Who do you have with you? Because again, you're going to be spending a lot of time on the computer, alone, here in my office, right? I'm here, working. And so you have to be able to deal with that, right? You have to be able to deal with working the long hours. For example, if you work for a company, I don't know, you work 33 to 40 hours. If you're doing it yourself, you're going full time indie dev, I guarantee you're working 60 to 80, right?
Hmm.
That if you want to do it solo, you get a team, you can get it down to 40, 50, something more manageable, but you're going to be working way harder because again, if you're working with a studio, you don't a AAA, you don't know what's involved in the marketing. You don't know what's involved in getting
Hmm.
everything published. But when you're doing it indie, you're gonna have to figure everything out, right? So do you have the ability to resourcefully search for the information you do? Because yes, the game community is welcoming and we're
Hmm.
helpful, but your game is your game,
You're
right?
responsible.
You're responsible. So that's the most important, not the most important, just one of the facets, one of the tenets that you need to be aware of. Like, you cannot dawdle, you have to keep grinding because again, like, let's say I started tweeting and let's say I started and then I dropped off and I stopped tweeting. People are going to forget about your game in a second because there's a million other games coming out. Well, thousands. Is it millions? It's thousands right
Uh,
now.
yeah. And going back to the point you said earlier about being able to hire people and find more people, like this is another major point that if there is a part of game dev that you can't do, you don't want to do, there's mostly someone out there who does want to do it for you. It's why good PR people are really worth their money and then some.
Exactly, because it's so much better to have a professional do something for you to do something poorly. And
Hmm.
because, like you were saying, when people are looking at your Steam store and your marketing, it looks terrible, then they're going to believe everything else is terrible, right?
Yeah,
So,
and also the time that it takes you to do something that's poorly, somebody can probably jam that out amazingly in maybe three
easy.
quarters less of that time.
Yeah, I've been there. I know you've been there too, like putting together thumbnails or anything on content creation, right?
Hmm.
You've been there, and someone could have done it in 5 minutes, and me and you were struggling all day, searching and researching and
Yeah,
stuff like that. And
yeah, like the overlay that I'm using right now was made by my friend Ken. He put this
exactly.
together in like an hour. It took him to make all the
And how long?
templates.
And how long would it have taken you? I mean, to research and
Yeah.
to do, like, you would be losing money doing that,
Hmm.
right? So you have to remember, time is money. So is it better for me to pay a professional
Hmm.
this amount of time, or for me to waste my entire day? And then if you think
Yeah.
about, okay, well, how much would I charge myself per hour to do it? And then when you really think about it, you wasted a ton of money,
Yeah.
right?
Like as a really good example, I'm right now debating if I want to hire somebody to do like my catch up to my libraries because
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of time during the day that I can't contact new places or do all my other
Yeah.
work. So I
Yeah.
mean, in 2023, I may hire someone for like 2 to 3 months to do all this stuff and save me 4 to 5 hours a day that I can be
Mm-hmm.
doing something else or contacting more places.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
it's just kind of that challenge of management, and that's another very big role that, again, like as you were saying a few minutes ago, people get into this industry out of passion. They don't get into it to wear ties and
Exactly.
have to set up meetings every day. But
Climb the corporate ladder, man.
mhm. But we do see that difference between developers who kind of, throw everything and just like hope it
Yeah.
works, and those who actively manage and plan. And
Right.
like we've said, like there's like that sense of magic I think some people have that these games will just if you just focus hard enough, the game will always get done. It will be perfect
Push
and bug free. But
push
there is
hard
a
enough.
ton of work that goes into even just making a simple game.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, again, like, you can't fathom how much some things in game development can take you. Like, the simplest things, uh, from menus to, I don't know, I could go on forever, but the simplest thing can eat your lunch, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes it's just better to get help. So yeah, when we're talking, let me go over that real quick. We're going over time management because um, when it comes down to time management, getting getting help or getting team members, it's amazing, right? So say for example, you've been solo deving for a little bit, you just get one person. You think, okay, well that's going to double the amount of work. It actually, like, it's more exponential than that because you're able to feed off of that person. If you got the right person, right? You both can talk and you create things that you never would have been able to create on your own. Bouncing ideas off of each other, get three people, and then everybody has their own unique skill sets, and the amount of time saving, the amount of things that
Hmm.
everybody working together, it's exponential, right?
Yep.
Of course you reach a cap, right? You don't want to go too big on the team because then it becomes too kludgy, right? You want to kind
Hmm.
of meet that lean and fast, an agile team.
Yeah. And again, being able to have these people not only as part of your support, but also who can do this work and carry their own weight as an
Yeah,
indie developer is a huge deal.
big
And
deal.
we've kind of gone away from, I think, the quote unquote rock star developer. You can just
uh,
do everything yourself. You can be the number one programmer, artist, composer, designer,
yeah.
uh, a system creator. You'll do all the marketing yourself, and you can do all that in what, like 5 hours a day. You can just
Mhm.
5 hours a day easily, and you'll be the
Easy,
number one.
easy. Yeah, no, sadly, those days are gone. Yeah,
Hmm.
like we said, the market changes constantly. 6 months, a year. I mean, big time. Again, we were talking about the numbers, the amount of that that they were making from sales from one year to the next is drastic, right? And again, we have to consider, probably veering off topic here, but of course, the pricing of the game. I went over this earlier, but that's something very important to consider. And if you're not sure, talk to someone who knows about it, right? Here's my game, find a consultant, mentorship, something like that to maybe help guide you in that respect. So,
Yeah. And again, there's always going to be exceptions to these rules. There are those games that are going to break out that nobody thought was possible. Again, Disco Elysium is one of those titles that it seemed like it just appeared one day
yeah,
and
it
it
just popped
dominated.
up.
Yeah. And again, like what people expect out of it. I mean, look at Super Giant Games. That, if your indie game is up against their indie game, again, it's that issue of, do you want the Rolls Royce or do you want
Yeah.
the little Beetle with maybe like the window broken and the door is not properly hung right? Which one do you want to drive for the next 4 or 5 hours?
Well, I'm gonna skip the beetle. I'll
Hmm.
skip the one with the beetle in it. Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if I touched on this, but the mental health aspect of it, right?
Hmm.
So that's one thing that we have to be aware of. I think I was starting to touch on it, but like again, you're usually here alone because we're working remote now, or so you're working alone. And you have to take care of yourself. You can't just sit here. You can't not eat. You can't not drink water. You can't not get up and stretch. You have to move. So you have to be like, it's holistic, right? And I'm big on this. I'm big on, if you're going to be an indie game developer, it's kind of like a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And for sustainability, you also have to be of your mental health. People don't talk a lot about it. People in this field,
Mm-hmm.
tend to have a lot of mental problems, ADHD, depression, anxiety, you name it. I mean, most of us tend to veer to here because we like being in front of the computer, we like video games, we like being solo, that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. But that's something that we need to be aware of, right? You can't work yourself to death. You can't die over the video game. You can't not feed yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those things have to be considered also, right? If you're trying to sustain it, you want to be making games as long as possible, want to sustain it as long as possible. So always make sure that you're taking care of yourself, you're taking care of your family, seeing your family, your
Mm-hmm.
friends. If always just try and not keep your world only video games.
Yep.
I'm not saying I adhere to that all the time, but definitely is something to keep consider. The mental health aspects of this are big and definitely not discussed enough.
Mm-hmm. And it's why a lot of people get kind of chewed up and spit out of the game industry.
Yeah, just nothing, just like baby food, just put out, and that's why I kind of like tell people to avoid AAA game dev because they will work you to death. You were just um a cog in the system, and of course, there's nothing wrong with going in there and checking out, see how things work, and maybe garnering stuff like that. But yeah, this industry will chew you regardless who you are. It will chew you up and spit you out unless you're ready. You have the thick skin, you have the passion, uh, and you are aware of what you're facing. What we're looking at as indie devs.
Mm-hmm. And like we've said, like with the amount of work that goes into, I think this will be, I think, my final point. And this is what we were kind of talking about earlier in terms of long term growth. I guess that I think could be a good one to end on. Do you have any other points you want to say before we get to that one?
Let's see here. No, I think we're good. Yeah, I think we've been
Okay.
all over everything.
Okay. So then for the final point, let's talk about long term because this is, I
All right.
think, something that a lot of indie developers, especially new ones, don't
Yeah.
consider. And this is an evergreen topic in terms of
Mhm.
game dev because a lot of, I think, people again have that assumption that game dev is like, you know, going mining gold. That, you strike it rich and then you're on easy street for the rest of your life. It's all done and over. But one of the things that we've seen, I have personally seen a
Yeah.
lot, is the struggle of maintaining a
Maintaining.
studio.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about maintaining it for a year or 2 years. We're talking 5, 10 plus years. And I think a lot of this is the fact that for a lot of people, they don't view indie studios or even game studios as being around for that long.
Yeah.
Obviously, of course, with exception to like Nintendo, Microsoft, the big three, along those lines. But again, like someone like Jeff Vogue's been doing this since 1994. Jake,
Jake Burkett. Yeah.
yeah, like 15, 20 years
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a very different mindset, I think, when you think about building something long term, as
Right.
opposed to just saying, I'm going to focus 100% on just this one game.
Mhm.
And then the question turns into, what do you do now?
What did you know? Right. And of course you have to hope it did well.
Yeah.
But yeah, but that's definitely not a mindset that you should be looking at. Again, this is should you be a game dev in 2022, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things you need to consider is that facet, like how long do I want to do this, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you want to sustain this, then you need to plan properly. Watch Jake Burkett's GDC.
Mm-hmm.
That one is amazing. His 11 years in game development without a hit. How he talks about
Mm-hmm.
planning for sustainability. So he talks about really cool stuff, reusing code, just
Mm-hmm.
doing things over. Just a really brilliant talk. I recommend that. And that's a good starter base to understand. Like, okay, well, how do I start thinking about this differently? You're not hitting a jackpot. We're not playing a
Mm-hmm.
casino. It is possible. Right, it is possible, but that is an exception, and that's not the reality for like 90% I guess developers, like most
Mm-hmm.
of them, right? So you do have to like take the mindset, okay, so how am I going to do this? Again, not 1 year, not 2 years, but
Mm-hmm.
for as long as possible. And so that is something. got to do. How am I going to do this? How am I going to weather the storm? Do I have enough finances set up for me? Do I have the support system to do this? And how am I going to plan, right? So while you're working on one game, you need to be planning on what's my next thing that I'm going to do, or at least have some things in the
Mhm.
back burner that, okay, well, this is what we're going to be doing. You know, you got to be doing. You have to continually be working. It's not just one game and I'm done.
And this is also why it's different doing this full time as opposed to being a hobbyist. You
Right.
know, if you're a hobbyist, if you want to spend 6 months to a year on some crazy prototype,
No
some
problem.
weird idea, go
No
for it.
problem.
Who's going to stop you?
Mhm.
But if, let's say, you're managing a team of 10 people and this is your livelihood, and you take 10 months off for something that turns out to be nothing, you know, where is the rest of that money coming in?
Right, right. Yeah, so you definitely have to plan for that. And
Hmm?
this isn't do you want to be a game hobbyist? If you want to be a game hobbyist, go for it,
Yeah.
right? No problem. But with like what we do on the shows, we discuss design, we discuss sustainability,
Hmm.
and so like again, planning ahead, and so again, the sad part is you're gonna have to study some business, right? You're gonna have to understand some business. You're gonna have to understand some marketing. If you don't understand aspects, find someone who does.
Yeah.
Reach out to people, because again, you don't want to have poor PR. You don't want to have poor business practices. You don't want to have poor taxes. Like all of these things are things to consider and that have to be considered, right?
Yeah.
So
The consumer does not care.
they
They
don't
don't
care,
care
man.
that you weren't good at PR. They don't care that you're not a good artist, or
No.
and they don't care if you took out a second mortgage on your home,
Ah.
or if this game doesn't succeed, you're going to be homeless. They,
And in fact, if you said you took out two mortgages, they'd be like, "Yeah, you better." Like
yeah.
they don't care. They really don't care. It doesn't matter like how much work you put in or how good it is. Well, how good it is, yes, but it doesn't matter how much work you put in. You could work so hard, and it's not doesn't look good. It doesn't come out right. So again, make sure what you're putting out is quality, and you have good people. And if you don't, reach out. So
Yeah. My final point about this is someone like Chris Park. I'm actually, for those of you watching this live, we'll be doing a catch up interview with him tomorrow from Arkin Games. Arkin nearly went bankrupt several times over the past decade, and he's been very honest and transparent about a lot of the mistakes he's made, about a lot of the money he's lost. And again, when you have that one huge hit and you think that you're unstoppable, you still need to think about how this company's going to work. You can't build an entire company off of just one single game. It can last you a long time, like we see with Path of Exile and Warframe and, again, AI Wars. But eventually, you're going to hit that point where it's not going to be giving you that same amount of money. You need to
yeah,
think where your company's going to go.
yeah, it works until it doesn't work
Yeah.
anymore. And so and like I was saying, you have to be planning for what you're going to do next while you're working on that, on while your game is running or live service, or while you're working on it, always be planning for it. So
Yeah. But I think that is my final point. So, do you have anything you want to throw
yeah,
in?
yeah, for sure. Like just a quick overview.
Hmm.
Game dev is probably the best time to get into it, right?
Hmm.
To learn about it. The communities out there are amazing. Um, you can find anything out that you want to find about an engine. All the engines are available. All the tools are available. So many free things are available. The overhead is so low. What you do need to do if you're wanting to get into indie dev is you need to consider, of course, all the facets. So again, I want you to remember, uh, we're gonna, the financial situations. You have to be aware of those. You have to be aware of your mental, your support systems, just overall holistically where your life is and can it support that type of lifestyle, because it isn't really a typical lifestyle. So you just have to be aware. Can you stick that? Is your wife going to be okay with you deving all the time? You know what I mean? Can you afford failures? Do you have the thick enough skin? Are you savvy with social media? All of these things think about them, be aware of them. Can you be consistent? And then once you think about all those things, then I think you're ready.
Yep. And again, it's good to learn. Like if you're a student or a teen somehow watching this, it's good to learn the stuff now. It's good to start doing research and figure out what you want to do. Find people, do networking, because it's better to learn this and fail when you have a safety net, as
Yes.
opposed to again trying to risk this all.
On a
When you're
mortgage.
30, 40, 50,
Yeah.
and you're trying to learn the same things that kids are, and you're
And they're
still
learning
dealing
it
with.
faster than you.
Yep.
Because again, I was like you were talking about, we're amazed with what, the students are putting out, 17, 18-year-old, 19-year-olds putting out amazing things that we couldn't have dreamt of back then.
Definitely.
So,
All right. But yeah, I think we'll wrap things up here for the show. I need to go and get a very late dinner myself. And I saw the other stream do. I'm doing a lot of talking today. But
yeah.
I think this was a really great topic.
Excellent. I had a good time. Excellent chat. I really feel like I had more to say, but I try to keep it a little condensed because otherwise we'd be here for like 4 hours.
Yeah.
So.
So, for everybody watching, thank you so much for tuning in. Do the
Thank you.
liking, subscribing, commenting, all that great stuff. You'll find links to all my stuff down below, and Discord, Patreon, and Twitter up there on the overlay.
That's right. And if you want to follow me, the links will be down below. But just my Twitter is my main one at CASUL_scrub, casual scrub. The links are there. Follow me, Samurai Pig. I stream development. That's all that.
We'll be back next week at our regular time around 5 p.m. ET on Saturdays if you want to tune in live. And come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.